All right. We're in for a real treat tonight because, we go through life asking questions. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids, and, when they began to talk and figure out stuff, one of the questions, you tell them about something, it's like, why? Why? That question, they never got tired of it for some reason. Why is the sky blue? Well, that's just the color it is. Why do cats walk like that? Because they have 4 legs. Why? And then, you go all the way through life and you don't stop asking questions. You keep asking questions. And even, if you make it to the nursing home, you're still asking questions. What are these pills for? Where are you taking me? Right? And yeah, you might even ask why you're here too. That's right. So you don't stop asking questions all the way through life. And, our guest is Alycia Wood. She's from RZIM Ministries. And she travels around answering questions. That's what she does. That's a pretty cool job, don't you think? Yeah, it's pretty neat. So, and she's going to tackle a really big question tonight. And so I'd like you to give a nice, warm Bermuda welcome to Alycia Wood.
All right. Well, good evening. All right. I have had the privilege of enjoying this beautiful country for the last several days, and sadly I go back to America tomorrow, which is exciting in some ways, but we just don't have this ocean. So you all are very blessed, and thank you for sharing it with me for the last couple days. Oh, well, that's interesting. Is that my fault? No? Oh, it's your... Okay, well, it should be coming up. Well, I'm here to chat with you today about a topic called Why Should I Believe, okay? And really, the truth, that might be my fault. Okay, all right. Let me... There we go. We got it to work, okay? Yay! Trust me, I'll be much more exciting with this behind me, okay? So we're glad it works. Okay, so my entire life, my entire job, what I get to do is to travel around and speak to people of all different religions and non-religions as to why Christianity is true, okay? So when somebody says to me, Alycia, I think your God is nothing but a fairy tale. I think Christians are just uneducated people and completely irrational and just follow something because a book says it, I'm like, great, you're my new best friend, let's talk, okay? That's what I get to do. So today what I'm going to talk with you about is this topic called Why Should I Believe? And the reason why I'm doing this topic is because I have discovered that we are all asking questions. And oftentimes people are looking for a reason as to why they should even engage or encounter a belief system such as Christianity. So that's what I'm going to roll around with you today. But before I do that, I'm trying to be as cool and as hip as you guys, okay? The older you get, the harder it gets, okay? So I am on Twitter, which I know you're like, Alycia, that is so old, but I'm trying, okay? Work with me here, okay? So I'm on Twitter. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, there's my Twitter handle. And it's a really big deal I'm on Twitter, by the way, because I am not a twit. However, I have tried to kind of, do that kind of thing, social media thing. I am not on Instagram. Because I just don't need to see my face that many times. But either way, I'm on Twitter. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me there. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Even though I'm from America, I would bet that I have somewhat of a similar story to many of you in here. From a young age, I asked questions. And so what I want to make sure I do is give you guys the opportunity, after I speak today, to be able to ask questions. So you'll notice in your seats, you'll see like these white pieces of paper, and you'll see like blue pens or black pens or whatever. As I'm speaking, if there is a question that you have, question on something I said, question on something I did not say, you can go ahead and write it down. And if you don't have a paper and need a paper, you can raise your hand and somebody can come around and give you a sheet of paper. So I do see some hands for people who do need some papers, so we can make sure we get you some papers. And if not, if we can't get you a paper because we've run out or for whatever reason, we also, are you ready for this? Because I know this might be a little scary. I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask a question live, as in using one of these. Whoa, like I don't know about this girl, right? Okay. So that's going to be a challenge. So for some of you, you may say, I don't mind doing that. And at the end, you might be like, okay, I'm going to ask my question live. Go for it. You can ask a question that you have. You can ask a question that a friend has asked you that you weren't sure what to do with. I've had people stand up and read me text messages from their friends. Say, my friend has asked me this question. I have this question for you. You can do that. So it doesn't have to be your question. It can be a question maybe of a friend of yours or something like that. So you're going to be able to have the opportunity to do that or to write it down. Now here's the key thing I'll tell you. No question is off limits. You won't scare me with your question. You won't scare me with your honesty. I won't suddenly get back on a plane and say, I'm done with Bermuda. I can't deal with these kids, okay? If you have it, you can feel free to ask it. Does that sound good? Well, let me share with you just a teeny bit of my story before I get going too much here. I was born and raised in Rochester, New York, which is basically, I got one woo. Okay, that's good. It's great. It is on the Canada border. So if you know anything about New York State geography, which I don't know why you would, it is right on the Canada border. And I grew up going to church. Okay, we went to church on Sundays. We went to church on like Friday nights. I went to church Sunday evenings. Or maybe I'd go during the week on a Wednesday night. Okay, I went to church. I was in youth group. I was in Sunday school. I did all of the things, okay? Had my little Our Daily Breads. I don't know if any of you guys even know what those things are, okay? I used to read these little Our Daily Breads, try to do my devotionals. I see some head nods. Okay, good. All right? So all of this was my life growing up. So if you were to say to me at that age, Alycia, why are you a Christian? Or why do you believe? I would say, well, that's because it makes sense of my life as a kid. Mom, how did we get here? Well, God made us. Okay, that works when you're a kid, okay? But then I got older. And I got older, meaning I went to college. Now, many of you in this room are not in college. Some of you are in college now. Some of you have already graduated. But college was an interesting experience for me. You know why? Because I went to a Christian college. And at this Christian college, you had to take a Bible course. Two, an Old Testament course and a New Testament course. And it was while I was in this Christian Bible college, in my Bible class, with my Bible professor, that I began to doubt everything. And I began to question everything. Now, it was this one class, maybe like, 50-minute class or an hour and 20-minute class, however long that one class was. And I remember sitting in there and listening to my teacher and just being like, you know what? I really don't think I can believe this anymore. And that one class erased 18 years of church and Sunday school and all of these things that I went to. And I walked out the class saying, you know what, there is no God. I remember walking back to my room, and I was looking at the trees and looking at the grass and looking at the squirrels and looking at the sky and being like, this is it. This is all there is. There's nothing more. And I remember just being like, okay, like just almost feeling like, not empty, but just kind of being like, oh, like stuff just wasn't as exciting anymore kind of a thing. So basically, if you were to ask me, so at that point what I did is I began to look over my life. Because I began to say, okay, Alycia, you can question Christianity. Fine. Question Christianity. But that does not mean that there isn't a God. You can say, I don't believe in Christianity, but another religion can be true. You can say, I don't believe in Christianity, but this thing over here can be true. Just because you deny Christianity doesn't mean that then nothing else is true. So I had to say to myself, all right, if you don't believe in Christianity, then what else is true? And that began me on a little bit of a search. And I realized that there were certain things that happened in my life that couldn't be explained any other way than if it had been God who had done it. Certain prayers I had prayed that nobody knew anything about that were answered. So if you were to ask me why would I believe and I was a college student talking to you, I would say, well, you know what? I can't explain my life experiences any other way. But at the end of the day, many people think, well, why should I believe? And so what I want to do is share with you some reasons why I think you should. Some reasons why I think I should, to be honest. But some reasons why I think you should believe, not just in God. That really, honestly, at the end of the day, doesn't really mean anything. But why you should believe in Christianity. So if I'm going to be honest with you, I have to tell you, from the beginning, that there really is no such thing as atheism. What? You are crazy. Get back in the plane now. Okay, well, hold on a second. This is what I mean. As I've traveled around, as I've met a lot of different people, you know what I've learned? Is that we all worship something. It may not be an organized religion, but we all worship something. Several years ago, I was with my little sister. And my little sister happens to be a fan of maybe a person that maybe there's a few of you in here who like. I'm not sure exactly, but let me see. Do we have any believers in the house? Oh, and you guys are not ashamed of yourselves? Okay, well, for all the believer fans here, and maybe for those who are not, you might appreciate this story. My little sister at the time was about 12 or 13. And she decided that her and her friend were going to go see Justin Bieber in Canada. Yes, because Canada is his home country. And even though he was going to be in Buffalo, New York, just in a few weeks' time, which is only about an hour and 15 minutes from our house, no, we couldn't go see him there. We had to go see him in Canada, in Toronto, because he's Canadian. And so we have to go see him in his home country. And that's like a 3-hour drive. So I was like, whatever, you and your friend do your thing. That's fine. Leave me out of it. I don't have anything to do with it. I'm happy. Well, about a few days before they went on this trip, all of a sudden their ride falls through. And now they need a ride to the Justin Bieber concert in Canada. So guess who gets to drive? The two 12-year-old, 13-year-old, girls to this Justin Bieber concert. But here's the thing, okay? We couldn't just go to the concert. We had to go up a day early. Why? Because we had to go to Stratford, Ontario. Because Stratford, Ontario is where Justin Bieber was born. Yes, you're starting to understand my humiliation. So I don't know if it's true anymore, but at that point, you could go on the Stratford, Ontario website, and you could click on a Justin Bieber to-do list, and they would tell you all of these things that you could do, like this is the river that Justin Bieber walked along, so we had to walk along that river. Then this is the YMCA where Justin Bieber played basketball, so we had to go to there and touch the door handle and all those kind of things, right? And then it tells you about Justin Bieber's favorite pizza shop. So we had to go into Justin Bieber's favorite pizza shop, and we had to sit at the table, and we had to touch the table, and the people there told us about what he orders and, blah, blah, all these kind of things, right? This became my life, right? Anyways, Justin Bieber, many of you may be familiar with the video you see of him playing guitar, and he's sitting on these stairs of this theater building. Yeah, I've sat on those stairs, okay? And we took pictures and we smiled because we're sitting on the same stairs that Justin Bieber sat on. The very next day, Justin Bieber's mother, Patty, was actually doing a book signing. She just released her latest book, and or her only book, I believe, and she was doing a book signing at a bookstore. So we drive from Stratford to Toronto, and I dropped the girls off at the bookstore. Now, Toronto's a big city. It's a major city. It's the biggest city in Canada, okay? So everything goes up. So this bookstore doesn't go out like this. It goes up like this. So I dropped them off, let them kind of make their way into, I don't know how horrendous this line is going to be. And if I don't get them there in time or they don't get to see her or whatever, then I'm the worst sister ever, right? So I drop them off, and I go find parking in Toronto because that's going to take me about 4.5 hours, okay? So I go, drop them off, I go park, I'm walking back, and as I'm walking into the building and going up the stairs, these girls are coming past me, and they're sobbing, right? And they're holding onto their mothers, and they're sobbing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, she's gone. Or they close off the line, this is horrible, what if I messed up? I'm starting to freak out that I messed up and made my sisters miss meeting Justin Bieber's mother. So I'm going upstairs, and as I get higher up the stairs, I realize, oh, she is here. My sister is in line, everything's fine. So we go up there, we wait in line, we take our picture with her, we smile. It's about 0.4 seconds is all they give you with her, because they shuffle you along. We did all that, and then we go and leave the building. So I had a lot of time to reflect on this experience with the Belieber girls, and I began to think of something. I began to realize what the reason was that these girls were crying about. Right? 'Cause I couldn't figure this out. Why were they crying? They got to meet her. What's the big deal? And then it hit me. They were crying because they met the mother of the object that they worship. They were so overwhelmed with emotion Because what had happened to many of them, right? Being a teenager, I don't know if, maybe not you guys. I'm sure you guys are just excellent teenagers, okay? But for many people, teenage life is tough. Preteen life is tough. And so when they have a bad day, they go home, maybe they put on a certain song, go in the room, let the song kind of help calm them down, or maybe they've had a fight with a sibling or a parent, and they're really upset, and so they go put on a song, and they listen to that particular song, and it makes them feel better, right? So there's almost this connection that they feel with Justin Bieber when they've never met him, because he's helped them in their tough times. And now when they meet the mother, they're overwhelmed, because this is the mother of the being that they see as wonderful. Why do we have a natural desire to connect with greatness? Why is it things that we see that are great we naturally gravitate for? Gravitate towards. It explains our infatuation with celebrity culture. Okay? Because we see these people as so great and so amazing. Look at this house. Look who they married. Look who they no longer married. Right? Look at this kid. Look at their hair and that makeup. Oh my goodness. Right? We are like infatuated with every aspect of these people that we see as great. And so what I think is while people associate worship with being religious, I think that's only because the non-religious people don't recognize their gods. I think there are millions of gods out there for us to worship. The question isn't, do I worship a God? But rather, which God is yours? And so I've heard people say to me, well, Alycia, you know what, I hear you, but to be honest, the real problem is with religion. Religion is evil. It makes people do evil things. And so if we eradicate religion altogether, then people will just be good. They'll just be loving, and they'll be kind, and there won't be any more horrific terrorist attacks or things like that. If we eradicate all religion, people will stop hurting each other. Now, I've had a time to think about that statement, and I really wonder why we think that we have the ability to do good all the time. What lends us to believe that we actually will want to do good on our own? There's an experimental psychologist whose name is Dr. Jesse Bering. And he specializes in evolutionary psychology and human behavior. So he would consider himself an agnostic. An agnostic is someone who's not sure whether or not there's a God. And the reason why, he was an atheist before, but when his mother died, he had some kind of like supernatural kind of experience that led him to say, well, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. I may not ever know. I may not have the ability to know. And it kind of led him from atheism into this world of agnosticism. Okay? So he's not a religious person, per se, at all. But several years ago, Dr. Bering conducted an experiment on kids ages 5 and 6 and 8 and 9. And this is what he had them do. He brought them into a room, and he had this dartboard there. And he says, okay, I'm going to put a piece of tape here. What I want you to do is walk up to this tape, turn around with your weak hand, take this little Velcro ball, throw it back, and it'll stick to the dartboard if you hit the dartboard, okay? And what we'll do is we will, whoever gets the most balls on the dartboard will get a prize, okay? So these are 5 and 6-year-old, 8 and 9-year-olds, so they're excited. This seems really fun. And so he leaves the room and leaves one kid in there. And the kid, of course, they're a little kid, starts like this. And then they realize, this is a lot harder than I thought. So they start to kind of look around. There's nobody there. And they run up to the Velcro board, and they put the ball there, and then they run back. What the kids don't know is that Dr. Bering has put hidden cameras in the room. And so he's watching the whole thing from the other room. So the kids maybe run up, they do that, and they come back to the line. And they're giggling, and they think they're all sneaky or whatever, right? So one girl, actually, which was interesting, she puts the ball on the door, or the dartboard, runs to the door, opens the door, kind of peeks out to see if anybody's watching, shuts the door back, and then goes back again, okay? So it's interesting. He does this again. This time, he introduces adults. And instead of leaving the child alone in the room, he leaves the adults in the room and has the child do the same thing. And then he runs the experiment a third time. And the third time, he introduces Princess Alice. So he tells the kids, you know what? Princess Alice is really special. You know what makes her really special? And they're like, what? And he's like, she's invisible. So they're like, oh, because they're 5, right? So they're like, that's so cool. And he's like, so this is the deal. Princess Alice is sitting in this chair up here. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to let you go ahead and throw the balls into the dartboard. Well, after doing this test with hundreds of kids, you know what Dr. Jesse Baring found? That when the adults or when Princess Alice was in the room, kids were significantly less likely to cheat. One kid actually was really cute. She runs up to the chair and touches and goes, Princess Alice, just to make sure she's there, kind of then runs away. What is he finding? What does his studies find? Well, according to Dr. Jesse, the adults and Princess Alice are fitting the role of what any supernatural being would fit in a particular person's life. Princess Alice is watching them. She cares about their behavior. And if they misbehave, she'll know. And so this is what he says. According to Dr. Jesse, and I quote, he says, an all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful interventionist, moralistic deity, so like a god, that helps steer people in the direction of good behavior. He says that all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful interventionist, moralistic deity, that helps steer people in the direction of good behavior. In other words, what he's saying is, or how about we think about this together? Would you lie to your parents if you knew they could never find out? What if let's say you are walking down the street and you see $5 million laying on the ground and there's no one around. What would you guys do with that money? Would you keep it? Oh, why am I here? I'm hearing yeses already. All right. How many of you in here have your driver's license? Any drivers in here? Okay. Right? All right. I don't know how much it applies here in Bermuda, because I don't know if I've seen many speed limit signs. Okay, but in my country, they're everywhere. Okay? How do we drive when there's a police car behind us? Do you see what Dr. Jesse was getting at here? Do you see what he was getting at? In other words, I'm not saying to you guys that, oh, you're saying only religious people, only Christians can do good. No. I'm not saying that. I know people who are atheists, people who are agnostic, people who are Hindus, people who are Muslims. You name the religion, they do good. I see people do good all around. What my thing is, not that you need a God to do good. My question is, without a God, who are you when no one is looking? Without that being watching, who are we when no one is looking? This is why when you look at lists of the most popularly viewed websites, you will see pornography websites to be on those lists of the top websites that are viewed. Because people do things when nobody that they believe is watching. So I think Dr. Jesse's findings show us one of the reasons why we need to believe. Not just in God, but in the right God. Because my question is, who would we be if we eradicated religion like these people are saying? Who would we be when we're alone? Well, I speak in a lot of places, as I said in the beginning. And some people agree with my point, some don't, but that's okay. But what I've learned is that they still like to resist belief because they believe that Christianity lacks evidence. Now, this is interesting to me when I hear people tell me, I won't believe because there's no evidence for Christianity. So my number one thing that I think of when people say this to me is, well, they just haven't researched it. People will say, well, the Bible has been changed years after years after years after years. Or, well, it was written by people who we can trust. Or there's no evidence that Jesus lived. I'll hear that. Or whatever it might be. So I hear all these different things. When that actually isn't true. Now, I could go on in Q&A about some more evidences, but let me just give you just a little taste of what Christianity has to offer us. You may or may not know this, but there's thousands of Bible manuscripts, New Testament manuscripts, fragments, whether whole page, whether tiny, whether something like this, of the text that we have right now. So we have tons of manuscripts that we have, or pieces of manuscripts that we have discovered that help us come with the English version we have, come together with the English version that we have of the Bible right now. Number two, the authors were actually eyewitnesses of Jesus. They actually knew him, or they were friends of eyewitnesses. So it would be like if we were chatting today, and you went home and wrote about your experience here today, or you went home, told your parent about what you saw today, and they wrote down about your experience here. They were not written by people that were 300-400 years later, and this kind of thing. It's not true. So the authorship of the text is actually very, very credible. Plus, we know there's a good amount of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Why? Because we know he died. We know he was crucified. We know he was buried. We know that something caused his followers 3 days after to actually be willing to die for him, when 3 days before they weren't, and they ran away. Peter himself said, I don't even know him. What caused this drastic change in these disciples? That of the 12 disciples that Jesus had, 11, Judas betrayed him, so now you're down to 11. And out of the 11, 10 of those 11 died. Where their lives were taken, whether they were beheaded, whether his tradition tells us that Peter himself was crucified upside down because he didn't think himself worthy to be crucified in the same way as his Lord. Regardless, they were killed for saying that Jesus actually was who he said he was. Something happened. We've never found the body. There's no body. Which is why people are like, well, look. Some people say, look, I don't think he rose from the dead, but I'll acknowledge that something happened. Christians, of course, say, well, he rose from the dead. There's no body. What more do you want? We have evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I can go on and on about this. But people still tell me, well, but that's not scientific proof. I'm like, okay. So is it true that we can only believe stuff based on scientific proof? How many of you would tell me that your mother is your mother because you got pictures with her, because you look like her, because you have memories of her? But have any of you ever given her a DNA test? Would I think you crazy if you told me your mother was your mother and you had never scientifically proven it with a DNA test? Of course I wouldn't. Because scientifically proving something is not the only way for things to be true. Better yet, let's use another example. Let's say you have a horrible, horrible headache. And so you go to the doctor. And the doctor says, don't worry, I have a medicine for you that you can take. So you're like, great. This doctor says, in 2009 alone, 27 billion people took this, or billion doses were sold. Okay? And that's only a tiny fraction of the billions of people that have used it since it became a common drug 50 years ago. So you're like, great, I'll take it. Sounds good to me. And he says, well, just know that there's a downside, though. It can cause some damage to your liver. But you're like, well, billions of people have taken it, and, that seems like I'm going to go ahead and take it too then. That seems fine to me. And ours says, okay, but one more thing before you take this medicine. I got to be honest with you. We're not exactly sure how it works. We're like, okay. Like we have theories, but there's no consensus in the medical community as to how this particular medicine works. But here's what we know, the doctor says, but we know it works. We know it works. We can't really prove it, but we know it works. So what do you do? Well, for most of you, you're like, look, this headache's bad enough. Billions of people have taken it. It's worked for them. I'm going to take it. And so you decide that you're taking it. Why? Because the absence of answers or the absence of proof doesn't erase its legitimacy. Just because it can't be proven doesn't mean it doesn't work. Just because it can't be proven doesn't mean it's not true. So you take the medicine anyways. Now here's the one thing I didn't tell you about this example, is it's actually true. If any of you have ever taken a Tylenol or acetaminophen or paracetamol, it's all the same drug, depending on what country you are, it's just different names. If any of you have ever taken that, then you have taken this drug that they call the Enigma pill. They really actually aren't sure how it works in your body. But yet you take it. Without scientific proof, you take it. Why? Because scientific proof is not the only way which we come to truth. There's other ways that we can know it. There's certain things in life that you can understand through words and evidence, but many, and perhaps the most significant, you understand not through words, but through an encounter. Several months ago, I was sitting in a hair salon, and I remember the gentleman I was speaking to and he was doing my hair, and we were talking about Christianity, and he says, you know what? If God appears right in front of me, if God just appears right in front of me, then I'll believe. Okay? So God appears, boom, and then I'll believe. What was he asking for? He was asking for an experience with that God. In other words, I want to see him. I won't believe unless I can see him. There's an interesting concept. It's an idea proposed by Jean Piaget in child developmental psychology, and it's called this idea of object permanence. And object permanence basically talks about how children construct their knowledge of the world based off of what they see and experience. In other words, for babies, if they can't see something, then it doesn't exist. Okay? So here is what Jean Piaget argues. Okay? From 0 to 4 months, a baby has no concept that something that they can't see exists. Okay? Which is why if you ever play peekaboo with a baby over and over again, and they laugh each time, you're like, this is the stupidest game ever. Like, what's funny? It's because every time you go like this, they think your eyes disappear. And you open up again, they're like, oh, they're there. Oh, they're gone. Oh, they're there. Right? They don't have any concept that something that they can't see actually exists. But from 4 to 8 months, if you have a blanket and maybe you have a little toy and you like kind of put it out underneath the blanket a little bit, you know what a baby will do? It'll start to reach for it. It's partially hidden. They can't see the whole thing, but they're starting to realize, maybe something exists. Even though I can't see all of it, I can see a little bit of it. So they might reach for it. Between 8 and 12 months, if you hide something under a blanket and take it out and take that object and put it behind your back, you know what the baby will do? They won't look behind your back. They'll look under the blanket. They look for the last place that the object was hidden, because that's where they saw it, so that's where it must be. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you put it behind your back. They're like, that's where it was at, and they go and look then. By the time they get to be around a year to a year and a half, they can find an object wherever you put it. It's under a blanket, behind your back. They're learning to look for the object. And finally, by the time they're about 18 months or so, and all these months are approximations, because every child is different. But by the time they're about 18 months or a year and a half, they can fully understand the idea of object permanence. In other words, they fully begin to realize that something can exist that they can't see. There's a world out there of stuff that they can't see, and just because they can't see it doesn't mean it exists. And what's interesting to me is that while some people disagree with this study, some people are like, well, is that really the reason why the baby's looking for it? Like some people, it's hard to know. We're talking about babies here, okay? But if this is true, then what does it tell us about belief? What does it tell us about how we come to the idea of belief? Because what I see when I speak to people, when I talk to adults, you know what I hear? Unless God appears in front of me, I won't believe that he exists. When I talk to adults, they say, unless I see it, I won't believe. Which is an interesting statement because we all learn from the times that we are babies that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And as adults, what we have successfully done is reversed our several months of child developmental psychology, which has informed us that things exist that we can't see. And we've just reverted back. Now, here's the thing. What is it that makes the baby actually be willing to go and see if there's something there? Is it because they're afraid their mother might be upset with them? No, probably not. They don't really understand that at that age. Is it because maybe their mom says, go look for this? Not really. They're still learning language. They don't fully understand language, so they can't really respond to her commands. So what is it that makes a baby willing to consider that maybe there's an object there? They are willing to look. G.K. Chesterton once said, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." You've got to be willing to look. Willing to look where the evidence is leading you, and the fact that there's enough evidence pointing in the direction of existence. Why would God want you to know these things? Because he wants you to know how important you are to him. He wants you to know the depth of his love for you. He wants you to know that he's much closer to you than you realize. He wants you to know that he's there. Way back in the beginning of the Bible, when God creates Adam and Eve and they turn away from him and they disobey, it says that God is walking in the cool of the garden, which means that God was close. His intention was always to be close to you. His intention was always to be near, not distant. And perhaps when we engage with God in that way, when we engage with him in closeness, we actually better understand our meaning. You know, when I first started speaking on these topics, many of the questions that I thought I would be asked, and many of the questions that I maybe was asked, I can't quite remember now, were more of like, what's the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus? Or what's the evidence for the Bible and these kind of things? But you know what I'm finding now? Is people are asking me questions that are much more personal. They're telling me, Alycia, I'm sad. They're telling me, Alycia, I don't really know how to deal with life. They're telling me that I just don't maybe want to get up in the morning. And what I've begun to learn is that people are hurting. The human condition, the way that we feel just sad and broken just because of life. And what happens when people are in this place? First of all, if any of you are in this place, one of the first pieces of advice I would tell you is to go off social media for a whole month. The studies that have come out now talking about the links between social media, specifically Instagram and Facebook, and how those lead to depression. The studies are overwhelming on that. We now know the links between social media and these things. Stay off one of those, both of those, all of those for a month and see how you feel. But of course, I would always encourage somebody to talk to somebody. Go talk to a psychologist, someone who deals with people who are going through just grief or just tough times in their life. But here's the one thing I would say that Christianity would offer somebody like that, is it would offer them hope. Now that may sound silly because we use the word hope in a silly way in our culture, right? If I have a birthday party next week, I say, oh, I hope you can come. And that's fine. That's the way our culture uses hope. But you know the Bible uses hope? It doesn't use hope as like a possibility, like, oh, I hope you come. Maybe you'll come, maybe you won't. The Bible uses hope as a guarantee of something that's to come. And so it talks about this hope, this guarantee of what's to come is that one day people who want to know God here on this earth will be able to be with God in the next. And that may sound silly, like that may sound trivial, or it may sound like it's not that big of a deal. But let me tell you how much hope can change your life. Let me just use a quick example. If I was to get in a car, and we all know that when you get in a car, there's a risk that you could get hurt. So what do? We get in a car and we put on our seatbelt, right? Okay, but Why do we put on the seatbelt? Because we might get hurt, and this might keep us a little safer. But what if we knew that when I got in that car, that I was going to get in an accident and be seriously injured? Would I get in that car and put on my seatbelt? No. Why? Because I know what's going to happen. And when you know what's going to happen, it drastically changes the way that you do things now. The possibility of me getting in an accident just brings about a small change in my behavior. I'll just put on my seatbelt and go about my way. But if I have a guarantee that I will be seriously injured, I'm not going to get in that car at all. And so when Christianity offers hope to people who are in just really dark times, that's actually life-changing. That actually means that one day you won't be crying. It means that one day you won't be hurting. One day you won't feel rejected by your friends. You won't have to worry about self-esteem issues. One day you actually will love yourself. Because it says that in the world of the next, God will wipe away every tear from their eye. Like physically wipe away your tears. And that hope to a person who's going through a tough time changes everything for them. Here's a little secret, guys. Ready? You can't tell anybody I told you this. Everyone is looking for a Savior. What do you mean, Alycia? You're crazy. Okay, well, take a look at your movie theaters. Superman, Batman, Thor, Captain America, Hulk. We have all of these movies that have these like human-like kind of people, but yet they have supernatural kind of powers. And what do? They come and they save us from the things around us that we can't save ourselves from, like the evil in the world, right? They come and they help deal with the evil in the world that we can't fight, and we love it because we recognize our limitations and we recognize that we need somebody to help us. So who's the Savior that you're looking for? Christianity offers a Savior that can help us deal with our wrongs and give us hope. And we should believe that message because that truth, friends, impacts the way you live your life. I want to conclude and then turn over to a time of Q&A, but before I do that, I want to share with you one last story. Many are familiar with the story of Thomas. Thomas was a disciple of Jesus, and after Jesus resurrects, he appears to many of his disciples, but Thomas isn't there. So Jesus rises from the dead. He appears to some women. He appears to the disciples, but not everybody's there. Thomas isn't there when Jesus appears to them after he's risen from the dead. Let's read what happens in this story. It says, "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe.' A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' Then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Now stop doubting and believe.'" Two things to note here. Number one, Christianity's never been a blind faith. How many of you ever heard somebody say Christianity's a blind faith? Okay? So in so many times, that's partly because we don't have a very good definition of faith. Somebody told me, faith is believing what you know ain't so, and they were quoting Mark Twain. That's not what faith is in the Bible. And so we don't really understand what faith means. But faith has always been based on evidence. If you notice, what does Jesus do here? Thomas says, "I want to see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side." And so Jesus says, "Here. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hands and put it into my side." First, Jesus gives him evidence, and then he says, "Stop doubting and have faith." That word believe is the same Greek word called pistos, which means to put your trust in. It's a response to the evidence given before you. Jesus doesn't say, just believe in me, and then he gives them evidence. He gives evidence first, and then he says, believe. If Christianity is a blind faith, if it's a belief system based off of no evidence, then Jesus got it wrong. Because he gave evidence to Thomas before he believed. To be a Christian, you have to move from belief in God's existence to trusting him, his character, and what Jesus teaches. Trusting him with the future life to come after this world. In other words, at some point, you have to allow for your information and experiences that you've gathered to allow for real belief and relationship. Belief in God doesn't matter in Christianity, right? Even the demons believe in God. That doesn't matter. God created the world so people could have relationship with him, not just believe in him. And so God, who is a being who exists in relationship, creates for the purpose of us being in relationship with him. Several years ago, I had the privilege of traveling to India. An early Indian Christian tradition tells us that about 20 years or so after Jesus' resurrection, Thomas, the same Thomas, travels to India. And he travels to India and he starts a church there. That church still exists till today. And he travels there and he shares with them the message of Jesus. But Thomas is also killed in India for his proclamation of who Jesus is. And so they have a church there where Thomas is buried. And so I went to this church in Chennai, and you can go downstairs. And when you go downstairs, you get to see his tomb. And when I saw Thomas's tomb, I saw this simple phrase written on it. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And when you walk up to Thomas's tomb in India, 2,000 years after this man has died, you see those 5 words on his tomb, "My Lord and my God." A man who walked with Jesus, but was overwhelmed with the evidence of who he was, that the only thing he could utter was "my Lord and my God." What will you do with the evidence that Jesus has given you? What will you do? All the stories and things that you've heard of Jesus through all your years of going to youth group and church like me. At some point, we need to stop just being receivers and we need to start being responders. At some point, we stop asking for more evidence. At some point, we stop saying, "I want more, God. You've given me this much." Think about what Thomas saw. Remember Jesus' life. Remember that Jesus walked on water. Remember that Jesus raised people from the dead. Remember that Jesus healed the blind. He healed the sick. What did Thomas see and still say, "I won't believe until you give me more"? But what happened to Thomas? He got to the point where he said, "Enough. I've been given enough. And at some point, I now put my faith or my trust in him. At some point, I believe." I'm going to turn it over to a time of Q&A now. And I'm going to give you guys a few minutes because I know that I've said a lot of things. And I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to kind of take out those cards. You can do it quietly and quickly and write down some questions you have. If you need some more paper, you can raise your hand. And there's people walking around who can hand you more paper. If you need a pen, you can do the same thing. And if you want to raise your hand, look at that hand already up in the back. I love it. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question, we are happy to do that as well. So I'll give you just a few minutes. I see a lot of hands. I actually see several hands. So I see you here. So I'm going to start here, and then I'll move on back. So I'll give you just another minute to finish writing down questions and handing your questions in. And we've got 2 gentlemen walking around with microphones who will, can we go to this young gentleman right here? I see his hand up. Just give him about 30 seconds, then we'll have you do your thing. If you want to write your names in email or phone number, whatever, it would be helpful because then if I don't get to your questions, because I'm not getting to everybody, then we can get back to you. Somebody can at least still answer your question if you put down your name and email or phone number, whatever it might be. So even if I don't answer your question, somebody can answer it for you. Okay? All right. We're going to go ahead and start. I see a gentleman right up here in the front. Go right ahead.
If free will causes sin, right? Or if we use our free will to cause sin, will there be no free will in heaven?
Okay. So you know what's interesting is I'm getting this question a lot. I don't know what's in the water, okay? But for some reason, this question has been popping up a lot more over the last several years. So the question is, do we get free will in heaven? I don't think I would say this. The purpose of our free will here is to help. It's not so that we can choose whether or not we want pizza or sushi for dinner, okay? The point of our free will actually has to do with our desire to connect with God, okay? The idea being that relationship can't be real. Okay, imagine if I tell one of you, okay, I want you to tell me you love me or I'm going to punch you right in the stomach. So you might say, okay, I love you, but you're not really feeling love for me in that moment, okay? Why? Because I'm forcing you, okay? I'm forcing you to be nice to me. I'm forcing you to say nice things to me. So the purpose of free will is to help us be able to look at God and say, you know what, God? I actually want to stop doubting and believe. It's actually saying, you know, God, I want to be in a relationship with you. So in heaven, if we're already in that relationship, now we're in a whole different set of situations altogether. Okay? We aren't. It's not a situation. We're not going to be able to be in heaven and be like, you know what? I'm actually kind of bored here. Maybe I don't want to be anymore. Right? That's not there. We've already freely made our decision. So I don't know exactly what free will look like in heaven. But the key part of free will now was to help us enter into that relationship with God. And in heaven, when we're there, we fully have that experience, that relationship. Stellar question, my friend. I can tell already that I got a bunch of thinkers in here. All right. I see another hand in the back. She had her hand up early on in the back, so maybe we can grab her quickly. And then I see hands like all over the place.
Hello, good evening. I actually have 3 questions.
Oh, my.
I know you thought I had 1, right? Okay. So when you said something about believing God does not matter. Okay. You said belief in God does not matter in Christianity, right? So my question is, if belief in God does not matter in Christianity, then what are we believing in when we call ourselves Christians? And how could you not believe in a God and still call yourself a Christian?
Okay. Is that your question 1?
That's the first question.
Okay. Let me just respond to that before you go on to number 2. Okay. What I'm saying is, don't just think, when somebody says to me, oh yeah, I believe in God, that doesn't make you a Christian is what I'm getting at. So what I'm saying, so yes, absolutely, Christians believe in God. What are we believing in? Believing in a cotton ball in the sky? No, of course not, right? Okay? So what I'm saying is don't just think, oh, I believe in God, therefore I'm going to go to heaven, because the Bible says even the demons believe. Okay? So that doesn't matter. What God is not looking for is for you to just say, oh, I believe in God and go about your life and not care anything about him. He's looking for relationship with him. He's looking for you not to just say, I believe in God. He's looking for you to do life with him. That's a very different thing. And so he's calling you to something more than just belief. So thank you if I was somehow unclear in that. Christians absolutely do believe in God. But just to say I just believe in God and I go about my life and I do my own thing and Jesus is, yeah, I guess he's kind of cool. I don't know. I really don't know much about him. That's not what God's looking for.
Okay. Thank you. Can you tell me the scripture for the Thomas story? There were verses, but no scripture.
Yes. It is Luke. Luke, I think, or is it John? Let me see. Sorry, John chapter 20, 19 through 31. John chapter 20, 19 through 31.
Okay, thank you. So this is my last question, and I've had this question all of my life.
Oh, great. I'm going to call somebody else up here to answer it. No, I'm joking. Go ahead. Talk to me, friend.
So I just want to know, like, what version of the Bible, should we believe in as far as it being true? Because there's so many different versions of the Bible. Okay. Like, I use King James Version for the most part. but then you have, I don't know, you have all these other
New
different
King
versions.
James,
So how do you
NIV,
believe
ESV.
one over another is what my question
Great.
is.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Bible translation. Okay? Does anybody under the age of 18
Yes.
know what the language the Old Testament was written in? Hebrew. Okay. With a little bit of Aramaic. Okay. Does anybody under the age of 18 know what language the New Testament was written in? Sorry? No, not Latin. That's a good guess, though. Greek, okay? With a bit of Aramaic. Jesus' words on the cross written in Aramaic, right? So you've got a Hebrew or Old Testament written in Hebrew, some Aramaic. You've got a New Testament written in Greek with some Aramaic, okay? So you have other languages that are written, and we speak, most of us in this room are speaking English. Do I have anybody in this room that speaks a second language other than English? Okay, right here, tell me. German, great. French, Portuguese, Afrikaans, excellent. Afrikaans, Spanish, all right. Thank you, I see a lot of hands. People who speak at least two languages will have a less difficulty with this question, and this is why. Because when you understand languages outside of just, when you understand what it's like to translate from one language to the next, then you understand why we have so many different translations of the Bible. Transliterations is what I should say, okay? So let me explain to you what I mean. When you're translating something from Greek into English, there are different ways in which you can translate that, okay? So we have the text, we're translating from Greek into English, and you can translate it in a couple ways. You can translate it literally, what each word says, but that doesn't always make sense. Why? Because as my friends here who speak other languages know, they know that the word order is different in different languages. So when you translate it, especially my German friend, I took German for 6 years, the word orders aren't all the same as in English. There's 3 forms of the word the in German alone, der, die, and das is. And then there's a whole range of conjugations for that. Okay? They're not always der, die, and das. There's other ways in which you can say it. So there is, when you translate from one language to the next, you can do a literary, you can do an idea or a concept. So we're saying, it says this particular thing, but if I translate it literally, it won't make sense in English, so I'm going to translate the concept. And that's what you have with these different translations. Some are going to be more literal in terms of how they do it. Some are going to be more in terms of conceptual. Let me just give you a quick example because from Spanish, okay? So in Spanish, there is multiple ways to say I love. Okay? In English, there's one, I love. I love pizza. I love soccer. I love warm weather. I love, just one. It's everything is you love everything, okay? In Spanish, if I want to say I love pizza, I would say me encanta, okay? Use the word encantar for things, okay? If you want to say I love your spouse, you would say te amo, okay? I love you, okay? So that would be the word amor, okay? If I were to say to a friend, I love you, I would say te quiero. Here's the problem. You know what te quiero literally means? It means I want you. You see your responses? So let's just say it was not the case, but let's just say the Bible was the original manuscripts were written in Spanish. Just say it's not true, we know that, but let's just say it was written in Spanish. Okay? I am not going to translate te quiero into English as I want you. Why? Because that means something different in English than it meant in the original text. It means I love you in the original text, but in English it means I want you. That's not going to translate the same. So I'm going to take the meaning of that, and I'm going to say I love you. Okay? Is it the same word? No. But it's the same meaning. So what you're going to have, the King James is slightly different in the sense of the King James, when the King James was translated, we only had about 7 manuscripts at that time. We just hadn't discovered them all. Not that we've discovered all of them, but we don't have the breadth that we have now. Okay? So they were using what they had at that time. But when you look at a lot of these other ones, the NIV or the new NIV, the more modern day one, you've got, that's going to, okay, let me start there. The NIV is going to be more of a translate concepts and meaning into more of a modern day language, okay? You're going to have some like the ESV that's probably going to be a little bit more holding to what the original text says. You're going to have in terms of the words, the specific words that are going to be used. You're going to have things like the Living Bible, or maybe better would be to say the Message, not so much the Living, where the Message is a paraphrase. Okay? When they wrote that, thank you, who is it? Eugene Peterson. He just passed away. I don't know why I blanked on his name. Okay? When Eugene Peterson wrote the Message translation, it was a paraphrase, which is why he didn't have any verse numbers in there. Okay? So you have people trying to communicate something that was in a language from 2,000 plus years ago into modern English. And for anybody here who speaks another language, you understand that you have to communicate differently when you're translating. So somebody says a whole sentence in German, it's not going to be the exact same in English, and you're going to adapt it to what the English people are going to understand. That's why you have those translations. So I wouldn't transliterations. What I encourage you to do is not be freaked out by them. Okay? It's just, they're all using essentially the same manuscript sources. They're just trying to find different ways of saying the same thing.
But if they're using the same manuscript sources, then why, when you read different versions of the Bible with the same scripture, why is it certain words are in there, but then certain words are taken out? And sometimes it's just completely different. So that's why I'm confused.
But that's in the English. That's not in the original. Okay? So in the original, you have the text as to what they are, what they say. Okay? But when in the English, there's going to be different ways in which you communicate that. Do you want to make a literal translation, or do you want to make an understanding into what we would say in 2019? Okay? So that's why you'll meet a lot of people who just learn the Greek, and they'll learn the Hebrew, and they'll just read it in Greek and Hebrew, because it's the most effective way.
It's the most original way.
Most original. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, man, I see hands everywhere. All right, we'll do another hand, and then I'll look at your cards. Oh. This young lady had her hand up for a while.
A lot of friends of mine asked me this question. Where did God come from?
Ooh. How many of you ever thought about that? Where did God come from? Where are your hands? Okay. Yes. Stellar question, my friend. Very, very good. My young Afrikaans speaker, right? I love it. Okay. Where did God come from? Okay, let me use this. All right. What's this? Okay, I heard somebody say something else. I heard phone, but I heard somebody say something else. Oh, what? I hear iPhone. Somebody's saying iPhone, okay? All right. So the minute you say iPhone, what have you said about this phone? Who made it? Okay, great. Okay? If I was to say, Apple didn't make this phone, you guys are all wrong. It actually, I was walking in the woods, and it just went boom. Why are you laughing at me? Because I'm crazy, right? Right? Is that what happens? Do things really just go boom? No, right? They don't just like come out of the air, right? Okay, so let's think about this. Why is it that it's crazy? Why is it crazy when I say, look, this phone came out of nowhere? Because anything that exists that at some point didn't exist has something that made it. Okay? So at one point, believe it or not, you guys don't even know this, but at one point we didn't have cell phones. Oh my goodness. How did we survive? Say such blasphemy. You know, we used to have something called a payphone. You actually had to pay to call your parents to pick you up from church or whatever. Yeah. Okay? And all the older people are like, yeah, we remember those. Okay? Exactly. Okay? At some point, we didn't have this phone. And because at some point this phone didn't exist, it makes sense when you would look at it and say, Alycia, who made it? Okay? So anything that goes from non-existing to being made and existing, we say, who made it? Somebody made it. But here's the thing with God. God doesn't exist in that way. God never went from not existing to existing. He was always existing. And so when something is always existing, they can't have a maker because there was nothing to make them go from not existing to existing, because that's not their situation. God can't have a maker because he didn't go from not existing to existing. He went from existing. So God exists in a way that's different than anything else we see around us, because every single thing outside God at some point did not exist. But that's why this kind of question is so hard for us to understand. Because we don't have any other example of it happening. But God's existence is different. He doesn't have a creator because he always existed. He was eternal. And it's only things that begin to exist that we can say, who made it? Does that help you, friend? You think you can share that with your friends? Okay, good. All right, let me look at, because I know you guys have written a lot of questions here. Oh, that's interesting. Very good, guys. I can tell that you guys are serious thinkers. Okay. Ooh. All right. I'm going to do these two. I haven't read through them all yet, but let me start with these two. What are some tips to say to someone who asked, why I believe in God? So think about this for a second. Everybody take 10 seconds. If somebody was to say to you, why do I believe in God? What would you say? I can't give you this answer. You need to think of it yourself. This is the question they're asking about you. Why do you believe? And here's the interesting thing. I had to sit back and think it too. Because you know what? I'd never thought about it. I just went to church. I read the Bible. I grew up in this. And I never really thought about why I believed. So to answer this person's questions, some tips to say to someone who asks why I believe in God, I would say the tip I have for you is, number one, take some time to think about it yourself, because every person's answer is going to be different. And what I don't mean is, how did you become a Christian? That's a different question. When they're saying, why do you believe in God, they're saying, why do you need a God at all? Why do I need to believe in a God at all? That's what the question is. And that's a question you need to think for yourself. Why is it you believe that this is true? Is it because you've seen evidence for Christianity? Is it because you've prayed a prayer that God has answered? Is it because you've had a certain experience with God? Why do you believe? And so my encouragement to that person would be to think about some reason why they personally believe. And then, the second tip I would say is, think through how you can explain your reason to someone that would make sense. You can't say, well, God answered a prayer. They'll be like, how do you know that wasn't just coincidence? What is it about your prayer that was specific? What is it about your prayer that makes you feel confident that it was God? So you can give that one a think. All right. Here's an interesting one. Even though the outcome may be for your gain, how do you get past the anger and resentment towards God for allowing negative circumstances to happen? Let me read again. Even though the outcome may be for your gain, how do you get past the anger and resentment towards God for allowing circumstances to happen? That is a very real question. If I was to stand up here and tell you that I've never been angry with God, it would be a lie. If I was to tell you that everything was always great in my life and I never had to worry about going through hard times or questioning God or doubting, it would be a lie. And I am not the only Christian who gets angry. And I would even say disappointed. Feeling like, God, you've let me down. And so I understand these feelings of bitterness. I understand these feelings of anger. So how do I get over it? How do we deal with it? The question was posed very interestingly because it says God allows. How do you deal with the resentment that God allows? And I don't know if they intentionally meant that word, but if they did, they chose a good word. because I think I would have a harder time with God if I believed that he caused a lot of the evil or suffering that I see. And I think there's a difference between causing and allowing. And so if you didn't choose that word intentionally, whoever asked that question, and you did mean causing, that's one thing I would say to you first of all, is I like the word allowing. I think that's what I see. I think the idea of a God who causes evil is a contradiction, because I don't think God can cause evil, but I do think he does allow it to happen. And I think he allows it to happen on this world for this time frame, knowing that he will put an end to it. But it will go on for this time frame. And so the only thing I can tell you about how to deal with resentment or bitterness or frustration is to be honest with God about it. I am. Tell him, Lord, you've let me down. Lord, you frustrate me. Lord, you're silent. Like, I don't understand. What have I done to deserve this? Why do you seem so far? There's an interesting verse in the Bible that says that the rain falls on the just and the unjust. And the reality is, my friends, is whether you are a Christian or whether you are not a Christian, God allows all of these things to happen to us, good or bad. And so the only way I know to deal with it is to, number one, tell him about it, tell him that I'm frustrated, and give him the opportunity to help me through it. Because I don't know, I can't always make myself get over it. There's times when I can, but there's other times when I can't. So I'm honest with him, and I say, help me to get through this time. And I think that's probably the advice I would have for you. It may not be stellar advice, because maybe it's an area I'm still working on. And that's just me being honest back with you. But to say that you don't feel disappointment with God, I don't know if that's possible to go a whole life without ever being disappointed. It might be. It very well might be. But I think for many of us, that might be our story, that at times we feel like he's failed us. But what I do know, too, is that there's times when I've been angry with God, and then situations have changed. And I see that he's helped me. And like he's helped make the change in the situation. So in other words, I was angry that something happened, that I was put in this particular position or whatever. But then he made the solution happen so that I was no longer in that situation. And so I think that helped me too, because it let me know that he saw me. And I think sometimes we can feel like God doesn't see us, and that's why we're angry. You're letting this happen to me and I don't deserve it? What about the person out there who treats people like garbage? They're living life fine. And so when he solves things for me, that helps me to know that he sees me and that he cares. And that helps me to deal with my anger too. Because I think bit by bit to know that he cares makes me feel like I can trust him again, whatever's going on. So thank you for that question. I think that was a great question that probably a lot of us in here have experienced at some point. Let me go back to the hands. Who was another hand? Oh boy, there's hands everywhere. You guys go and take your pick. I'll let you fight it out.
So, what has inspired you to be what you've become now? Yeah, what was your biggest inspiration?
I think my biggest inspiration was just meeting people who were not Christians. And the reason why they were not Christians was because of, these certain reasons over here. And in my conversations with them about these reasons, I realized that the idea that they had of Christianity wasn't this. Like, this was not Christianity. When I said the word Christian, I meant this. When I said the word Christian, they heard this, or they thought this. When I said the word God, I thought these things. They thought or believed these things. And what made me, I think, number one, I'm just wired. I'm just wired to question everything. My undergraduate was criminal justice, right? So I love clues and mystery and investigation. Like, I just love it all. So I'm naturally inquisitive. But I think for me, what really spurred me on was meeting people who say, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in Christianity, and I began to realize that the God and Christianity they rejected was not the truth. And so maybe what I could do is help them to know what the real truth is. So if they said at the end of our conversation, look, I don't want God and Christianity, that's on them, but at least they're rejecting the truth this time and not the lie. And that was my big thing, because I realized a lot of people don't know what Christianity teaches. And I'm not even talking about kids, guys. I'm talking about adults. I'm talking about people that I meet, people that are professors, people that are smart and are intellectual. And some of the things they say, I'm like, that's not Christianity. Where did you get that from? And I learned that people have had bad experiences in the church, which are valid, because believe it or not, Christians don't always get things right. And I learned that people don't really go to the Bible for their information. They go to the internet, or they go to YouTube, or they do a Google search, or they listen to somebody on TV that's just some angry person talking about nonsense. And they form their ideas of Christianity based off of all those things. And so for me it was, look, I just want to help them know what the truth is. And should they not desire it, that's totally up to them. But at least they've been given the real thing. Because what I'd hate for somebody to do is to go all their life denying something that doesn't even exist. And so I think one of the best things to me is when I have a conversation with somebody and at the end of it they're like, I've just never heard Christianity talked about like that. Because to me that lets me know that they're starting to grasp what the real Christianity is. So thank you for that question. It's okay.
So, with the human race currently destroying ourselves through climate change and evolution, global warming, sorry about that.
Sorry, I was like, okay.
Will God intervene to save us, in which case we shouldn't worry, or will he let his beloved creations destroy ourselves?
Next question. No, I'm joking. So, I don't have a full answer for you on that because I can't fully say what God will do. Okay? So my short answer is I don't know because I don't know fully what God will do, but I would say this. I don't think he's allowed us to fully destroy himself because I do believe that at some point Jesus will return, right? And so if there's nobody here, then that would mean like he'd be like, oops, did I come too late, right? And then I don't think that's possible, okay? So I don't think he will allow us to fully destroy ourselves. But will he allow us to destroy? Absolutely. We've already done that. I mean, there's tons of species that are extinct now because of choices that we've made as a society, as a global society I'm talking about. So we have already changed the environment, and we've already changed the animal world and all of these things. So I absolutely think he will allow us to continue to destroy. To whatever extent, I don't know. I don't know how far it will go. But, you know, I struggle. Like, it's so weird, right? Because I'm here in a place like this. And I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I've had the most amazing host, and she's taken me all around Bermuda. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been like, thank you, God, for this beauty. Like, thank you, God, for your creation. And I just don't understand why people don't see that and why they think it's better to just destroy. I was talking with someone today, and I shared with them how I believe that in the same way that artwork is a reflection of the artist, I think creation is a reflection of the creator. When you walk into a museum and you see a particular piece of art, and because you know art, because you are a well-rounded cultural young man, you see this particular piece of art, And you're like, oh my goodness, that's got to be Da Vinci, or that's got to be Chagall, or whatever, right? In other words, you could tell by looking at the painting who the artist is. And I think that's natural because I think artwork is an extension of the artist. And I think in the same way, creation is an extension of the Creator. There's a beautiful passage in Romans chapter 1. It talks about, for the beginning of time, God's invisible attributes and divine and eternal God have been clearly seen through what has been made, so that men are without excuse. In Job it says, but ask the beasts and they will tell you, or the birds of the air and they will teach you, or ask the earth and it will speak to you, or the fish of the sea will explain to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In whose hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. It's saying that creation itself knows its creator. And to me, I just look around and I'm just like, thank you, God, for giving this to us. And so I struggle with people who don't appreciate it, and with people who don't value beauty, because I just would hate to see what this world would look like if it wasn't like this. So I don't have a full answer for you on that, my friend, but I would say that I think that God will allow us to. We've destroyed before, and I think He'll continue to allow us to destroy. To what extent? That's on Him. Thank you. Oh, man. I'll let you guys fight that out. There's all kind of hands.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, go right ahead.
What verse, the one you just said, what verse?
Job, was it, and the animals? Yeah. Job chapter 12, verses 7 through 10.
Hi.
Hey.
Before I ask my question, I would just like to thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that.
Christianity needs this more.
Thank you.
Personally, for me, one thing that's really conflicted me with Christianity is the idea of hell.
Okay.
And there's good people out there that aren't Christian, and I just don't see why a loving God would allow good people to burn for eternity. So.
Okay. Oh, boy. My friend, I think there's a lot of people in this room that would relate to you. I think you asked a question that's probably on most people in this room's mind. It's something that I think that we all struggle with. First of all, let me say this. There is no answer I will ever be able to give you that can make you feel okay with the concept of hell. You should never feel okay with it because God's not okay with it. I'm not going to stand up here, and nor should anybody stand up here and give you some, sorry, I don't know what that was, give you some great explanation. Nobody should stand up here and give you some great explanation for hell, and that you walk away being like, oh, okay, it doesn't bother me anymore. No. It should always bother you. It's what causes people to dedicate their lives to living in all parts of the world, telling people about Jesus. It's the first thing. The second thing is this. Part of the reason why we struggle with the concept of hell is because we don't have an accurate concept of heaven. So when we think of heaven, we think of maybe a guy sitting on a cloud somewhere playing some harp, right? And we're like, oh my goodness, heaven is going to be so boring, right? I'm going to just bounce on clouds all day long, like seriously, right? Right? And so we're like, this just seems silly. And really what heaven is for the Christian, what heaven was always intended to be was this. It was always intended to be the place where people and their Creator can live in the perfect relationship that He always intended for us. In this world, even if you're a Christian in this room, in this world, even if you are a Christian, you are not experiencing the closest that you will experience with God like you will when you're in heaven. It still cannot compare. And so what heaven is for a Christian is this excitement and this hope of finally being with their God, spending all of eternity with them. It's not about just eating a really good meal. It's not about playing a certain sport and being really good at it. Like, we have these little trivial ideas of what heaven is. So number one, heaven is about being close and being in a relationship with God. Once you understand that, now let's think of what hell is. This young gentleman here in the beginning asked the question about free will. And here's the thing that you have to understand. Is that when God creates this world, he creates it with the possibility and the potential for love. Okay? But the minute you create the possibility of love, you create the possibility for their people to not love. Okay? In other words, think about the example I gave you earlier. Tell me you love me, I'm going to punch you in the stomach. Okay, well, what is that? Right? That's a forced love. Forced love is not real love. It's not genuine love. Okay? If I brought a couple up here, husband and wife, and let's say they're in their 90s, and let's say they've been married for 70 years, and I say to this husband, why her? Why did you pick her? And he goes, well, Alycia, she was the only girl in town. Okay? That's going to make her feel one kind of way. But what if he says to me, you know, Alycia, it's interesting you asked that question, because I actually was really interested in another girl. And I was at this birthday party when my wife walked in the room, and I started talking to her. And I found out she's really cool. And I really loved chatting with her, and I really loved engaging with her. She was really nice. She was really pretty. And I was like, wow, she is special. That's going to make her feel a different way. Why? Because he had the choice to choose something else. But he chose her, which means that to her, that love is real, because he didn't have to love her. He wanted to love her. What we need to understand is that there's people in this world who say, God, I don't want to love you. I don't want you. I am not interested in you. I think my life is fine. I don't need you, or I hate you, or whatever it might be. And so when they die, what is the loving thing for God to then do? Now that we understand what heaven is about closeness and relationship with God, and you have somebody who says, I don't want to be with you, God, then is it loving for God to make that person live in heaven with them for all of eternity? For that person, as my colleague Vince Vitale says, heaven would be hell for them. When you have better understanding of heaven, then you understand that what hell is God giving people what they want. They say, I don't want you, God. I do not want an eternity with you. I don't want life with you now. And we make the assumption that we think, oh, well, maybe we'll want a life with them then. We don't want it now. We'll want it with him then. What makes you think that you'll change your mind? What makes people think that? But here's the second part of your question. You said there's a lot of good people out there. And you're spot on, my friend. I would agree with you. Religion or no religion, there is a lot of good people out there. But here's the thing. If God starts saying, I will let you into heaven because you're a good person, then there's going to be some serious problems with that idea. Let me tell you why. Number one, when God says, I'll let you in because you're a good person, he's saying, what you believe about me, whether you like me or hate me, all of that is irrelevant. Just do good things. So you could hate God and do good things and then go to heaven. Well, that's like the situation we were just talking about. Okay? People saying, I don't want you, God. I hate you. Yeah, I did a bunch of good things, but I don't want you. But that's what heaven is. Heaven is God. You can't be in heaven without him. So that first example of God, of the situation where people do good things but hate God, that fails. But what about the second example, where there's a lot of good people in a lot of different religions? A lot of religions out there where they're doing good things and they're loving people and they're caring for the poor and they're doing genuine good things. Should they go to heaven just because of their good deeds? Well, let's think about this. My first question would be, what is the number of good deeds that you need to do to get to heaven then? I don't have a number. I don't know a number. All I know is the standard is you live perfect. And although I don't know all of you, I'm going to take a guess that none of you are perfect. That at some point in your life you've messed up. So if the standard is perfection, which is God himself, and we can't get there because we've already messed up, then how many good deeds do I need to do to get there? You can't get there. So my thing is, let's just say we know a number. Let's say it's 30,000 good deeds, okay? So I die, I get to heaven. God, I've done 30,000 good deeds. Step out of the way, I get in. So I make my way in. I don't need him, right? I've done the good deeds. It's all in me. I can go into his heaven because I've done the good deeds. I've met the standard. I'm good. I really don't need God. I can go in. There's other problems with that kind of thinking as well. But either way, let's say I did my 30,000. I go in. The person behind me in line has done 29,999 good deeds. Well, they're one deed short. Well, that stinks for them. Right? Think about that. So if it is a number of good deeds, there still is going to be people that are going to fall short of meeting that standard anyways. But here's the more problematic idea with me, with this idea that if you're good enough, can't you just be there? There's a lot of good people. Why won't God just accept you from being good? Because if God accepts you for being good, then that means his love for you is conditional upon your good deeds. And that is fundamentally problematic with God. This is why. When your mother carried you in her stomach, for some of you, you may have given her some really bad morning sickness where she was throwing up a lot. Or maybe she was really sleepy. Or maybe you did a really good job of playing boxing in there and you were kicking away and doing things. Like you were making her uncomfortable. But she loved you anyways because you were her child. Then you're born and you have the nerve to wake up every 3 hours and demand to be fed, demand to have your diaper changed, demand to be fed again, demand to have that diaper changed again. Like you are demanding and rude. Okay? You don't clean, you don't bring any money into the house, you don't cook your own food, and you're demanding things of her. But you know what? She loves you anyways. Why? Because you're her child. In other words, what we see here is something called unconditional love, where it's a love that parents have for their children, not because their children are perfect, but because they're fully aware of their mistakes and failures, and they choose to love them anyways. So the love that a parent has for a child isn't based off of their good deeds, because no baby would ever earn it. It's just given to them because they love them, which means parents love unconditionally, even when you mess up. Here's the problem. If God accepts us based off of our good deeds, that means his acceptance is based off of what we've been able to do, which means he loves us less than our own parents love us. If he loves us less than our own parents love us, how is he a good God? I hope that God, in fact, I'm grateful. I shouldn't say hope. I'm grateful that the way to get to heaven is not based off of your good deeds. Because number one, you don't know how many you need to do. Number two, you'll never know if you've hit that number because you haven't started counting since you were 2.5. So you don't even know if you've ever hit that number, if there is a number. And number three, it means that God's love for you is conditional upon your deeds. It means he loves you less than your parents. And if that's the case, then why would I want him? I think the best system is the system that God has set up for you all. Saying, believe in me. Believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. Believe that he died and rose from the dead. And believe he's the only way that you can get to heaven. So God extends forgiveness to us all. Not because we've been good enough to earn it, but because we're not and we'll never earn it. And so he gives it to us when we come before him and say, I believe, forgive me. And so while hell is a tough concept for us, it absolutely is. But I think the toughest part and the saddest part about hell is that that's what people chose over God. That's the part that makes people grieve. And I guess to get back to this young lady's question over here about what propelled me to do what I do, I would have to say that's got to be a part of it, my friend. Because I don't want anybody to go there. I gain nothing from people going there. It's not like, oh, there's going to be more room in heaven for me. No. God doesn't have like a size problem in there. I don't want people to go there. And so what do? I tell them. Well, I know I didn't get to all your questions. And I know that there's a lot more. But I know that I've talked about a whole lot of different things today. And I want to give you guys the opportunity now to maybe go one step further. You know, I just talked about like heaven, and I just talked about hell, and I talked about relationship with God, and I've talked about all these things. And I know in this room that there's some people in here who are like, look, I'm a Christian, but like the person who asked that question about anger, resentment, like I'm struggling with that. I struggle with God. Or something's going on in my life and I'm hurting. And you're looking for somebody to pray for you. Or maybe you're somebody in here who's like, you know what, I've heard this Christian thing before, I've been a Christian before, but I'm like you, Alycia. I'm questioning. I'm doubting. Like, I don't know what's true. Or maybe, if that is you, if you're in that second situation, let me tell you, there is no shame in the game, my friend. God isn't looking at you and saying, are you questioning me? How dare you? You know how, I can't stand you. He's not saying any of that to you. Maybe you're someone who says, look, I haven't really heard this Christianity thing before, or maybe I have heard it, but I've never really said I believe. I've never taken the step that Thomas said, which is, you've given me enough. I believe. And you want to do that today. So, 3 situations I'm giving you. You're a Christian and you just need prayer for something going on in your life. Something that's going on. Something you're struggling with. Something that's bad. Whatever it might be. Or maybe you're someone who says, you know what? This whole Christianity thing, I've doubted and I've questioned. And I just have more questions. I need someone to talk to me a little bit more about Christianity to help me process it through. Or maybe you're in the 3rd category, which is the person who says, I think I want to do this. I want to stop doubting and believe. So I'm going to have a time where I'm going to ask, I know there's a variety of churches here, so I'm just going to ask if like 6 leaders, I don't care what churches you're from, it doesn't matter to me, if you would just come up here and join me. Any 6, the first 6 to come up is fine. And if you're a student in here and you're like, look, I want to come up for any one of those things, then I would say this is your time. Please come on up here and let us chat with you. Or let us pray with you. And the person that's going to be the hardest for is going to be the first one. Because I guarantee you there's people in here who are sitting in these seats who really want to come up, but they've got to wait for that one. So let's just pretend that there's already 4 people up here. So now you can be the 5th, and you don't have to worry about being the first. But I want to encourage you, don't let these opportunities pass by. What's true matters. I'm not here because I needed something to do on a Friday night. I'm not here because I just think it's so fun to stand in front of 100 people and talk. I'm here because I've looked at this stuff and it's true. And why not embrace something that's truth? Why not embrace something now that is so great, that is actually good news? And so I'll give you a few moments. Think about those 3 things. Or if there's a 4th situation that I didn't think of, you can come for that as well. But this place is going to be open for you. Just come on up.